The moment he turned off the TV and said, "Get out, old woman," I knew my life inside that house was over. The remote clicked once, and the room fell into a silence so sudden it felt violent. I had been sitting in my chair by the window, the one with the worn armrest where my hand always rested, watching the evening news the same way I had for years. Not because I cared so much about the headlines, but because that half hour belonged to me. It was the only time of day when no one needed anything, when my knees stopped aching and my thoughts could settle. Then Evan stepped in front of the screen like a shadow crossing a wall. He did not look at me at first. He simply reached out, pressed the button, and let the black screen speak for him. Then he turned and said it clearly, loudly, without hesitation. "Get out. Go to your room. This living room is mine now." For a second I wondered if I had misheard him. 69 years of life teaches you that sometimes cruelty disguises itself as misunderstanding. I looked past him to the kitchen doorway. My daughter Rachel stood there holding 2 grocery bags, the plastic handles digging into her fingers. Our eyes met. I waited. Just one sentence. "Mom, this is your house," or "Do not talk to her like that." Anything. Rachel lowered her gaze. That was when something inside me went very still. Not angry, not broken, just clear. Evan dropped onto the couch I had paid for and turned the volume up on his phone as if I had already vanished. In his world, I was furniture, something old that came with the house. I stood up slowly. My joints protested, but I ignored them. I walked to the hallway, reached into the bowl by the door, and wrapped my fingers around my keys. The metal felt cold and solid, real. Evan laughed behind me and said, "Do not forget your glasses." Rachel did not follow. At the door, I paused. The framed photo of the desert hills hung slightly crooked. The rug I vacuumed every Saturday lay flattened where Evan's shoes always landed. I realized then that I had been shrinking myself inch by inch for 4 years, making space for a man who believed space was something you took. I stepped outside and closed the door gently, not in anger, not in fear, like placing a final period at the end of a sentence. The air was cool and smelled like dust and evening flowers. I locked the gate from the outside and walked until I found a cab. The driver asked where to. I gave him the name of a hotel downtown. When I sat back, my hands trembled, not because I was afraid, but because my mind had begun to work again. That night, alone in a quiet room, I opened the old leather folder I had not touched in years. Inside were copies of documents I once handled daily when I worked at the county land records office. Deeds, titles, ownership lines that did not lie or forget. At the top of one page was my name, Margaret Cole, sole owner. I smiled for the first time that evening. Evan had taken the remote, but he had never owned the house, and tomorrow he was going to learn the difference. I did not sleep much that night, but it was not the restless kind of sleeplessness that comes from fear. It was the alert stillness of a mind that had finally been given room to move again. The hotel room was quiet, in a way my house had not been for years. No doors slamming, no television blaring from another room. No man pacing the floor like a caged animal. Just the soft hum of the air conditioner and the muted glow of streetlights leaking through the curtains. I sat at the small desk by the window and spread the contents of the leather folder in front of me as if I were back at work, years ago, before retirement softened my days and dulled my vigilance. I had spent 32 years at the county land records office. I had watched families tear themselves apart over property lines, wills, and forgotten signatures. I had seen sweet voices turn sharp the moment ownership was questioned, and I had learned one unshakable truth. Feelings fade. Paper does not. The deed was there exactly as I remembered. Recorded cleanly. No liens, no transfers, no joint ownership. The house had never stopped being mine. Not when my husband died. Not when Rachel asked if she and Evan could stay for a little while. Not when that little while stretched into 4 long years of swallowed words and closed doors. I poured myself a cup of hotel coffee and let it sit untouched. My reflection in the darkened window startled me. The same gray hair, the same lined face, but something in my eyes had changed. I looked like the woman I used to be at the counter, the one people underestimated until they realized she knew exactly where to look. I took out my phone and scrolled to a name I had not dialed in years. Daniel Price. We had worked across the street from each other back when I was still filing documents and correcting errors no one else noticed. He handled property disputes. I handled the records that decided them. We had crossed paths often, professionally, respectfully, without small talk. He answered on the 3rd ring. Margaret. His voice carried surprise, then concern. It is late. Are you all right? I am now, I said, but I need your help in the morning. There was a pause. He knew me well enough not to ask for drama. What happened? I told him the truth without decoration. My son-in-law ordered me out of my own living room. My daughter said nothing. I left. They have lived in my house for 4 years without a lease. I want them gone, legally. Another pause, longer this time. The house is still in your name, he asked. Sole owner, I replied. Then you are not asking for permission, he said calmly. You are asking for procedure. Exactly. He exhaled once, slow and deliberate. Then listen carefully. They are not tenants. They are occupants by consent. That consent can be withdrawn. We will prepare a notice. It must be served properly. No shouting, no confrontation, just paper. I closed my eyes for a moment and felt something settle into place. Tomorrow, I said. Tomorrow, he confirmed. I will send my associate to serve it. You do not need to be there. Good. Before we hung up, he added softly, You know this will change things with your daughter. I know, I said. But things have already changed. I just stopped pretending they had not. When the call ended, I finally drank the coffee. It was bitter but grounding. I lay down fully clothed on the bed and slept deeply, like someone who had put down a heavy load at last. Outside, the city moved on without me. Inside that quiet room, a decision had been made. And by morning, the house I had been told to leave would receive a visitor who did not knock out of courtesy, but out of law. Morning came with a pale desert light that slipped through the hotel curtains and rested on my face like a hand. I woke without an alarm, without the familiar jolt of dread that used to greet me each day in my own house. For the first time in years, my thoughts were not about what mood Evan might be in or how carefully I would have to move around him. They were precise and orderly, like documents laid out on a desk. By 8:30, my phone vibrated once. Daniel Price. He is on his way. I showered, dressed simply, and sat by the window with my purse on my lap. Inside it were my keys, my identification, and the folder that had quietly waited for this moment. I imagined the house across town exactly as I had left it. Evan asleep on the couch, the television probably still tuned to whatever he had claimed the night before. Rachel moving carefully, anticipating his temper, mistaking silence for peace. At 9:12, my phone rang again, a different number. Mom. Rachel's voice was sharp with panic. There is a man at the door. He says he is here on legal business. I did not rush to answer. I let the phone ring once more, then twice, and only then did I speak. "Is Evan awake?" "He is yelling," she whispered. "He thinks it is about the internet bill or something." "Mom, what is happening?" I looked out at the street below, at people walking to work, unaware that a quiet earthquake was passing through my family room. "Listen carefully, Rachel," I said. "Take the papers. Read them, and tell Evan to lower his voice. I am not available for shouting today." There was a muffled explosion of sound on her end, Evan's voice crashing through the phone, demanding to know where I was, what this was, how dare I embarrass him in front of a stranger. Then silence, broken only by the faint rustle of paper. "Mom," she said finally, her voice unsteady, "it says notice of termination of occupancy. 30 days. "Yes," I replied. "That is correct. You cannot do this. This is our home. It is the house I allowed you to stay in," I said calmly. "That permission has ended." I could hear Evan in the background, swearing, pacing, grabbing at words he did not understand. Rachel began to cry, but I did not soften my voice. "This man is only delivering paper," I continued. "He is not your enemy. The law is not attacking you. It is clarifying something that should never have been confused." The call ended abruptly. I imagined the associate, neat and composed, stepping back through the gate while chaos filled the space he left behind. I imagined Evan's face as the word occupant settled into his understanding. Not owner, not provider, occupant. I went downstairs and ordered breakfast in the hotel cafe. Oatmeal, coffee, water. Simple things. Halfway through my meal, my phone buzzed again. Transaction declined, card suspended. I smiled faintly. After the notice came reality. "Mom," another message followed. "The internet just went out. Evan is furious. What are you doing?" I finished my coffee before replying. "I am reclaiming my life." I set the phone face down and let the city noise wash over me. Somewhere across town, a man who had mistaken volume for authority was learning how thin his ground really was. And somewhere inside myself, a door that had been closed for years had finally opened. This was only the beginning. The first real crack appeared at a grocery store 20 minutes from my hotel. I did not see it happen, but I felt it through my phone. Rachel's name flashed again, followed by a stream of messages so fast they blurred together. "The card is not working. The cashier is staring. People are watching. Evan says fix it now. Mom, please." I let the phone sit beside me on the table while I finished my oatmeal. I wiped my mouth, folded the napkin carefully, and only then picked it up. "It is not broken," I typed. "It is closed." The reply came immediately, furious and unfiltered. "You cannot do this. That card is for groceries, for necessities." "For 4 years," I answered silently. "For 4 years, you lived without rent, utilities, or contribution. This is not an emergency. This is a correction." A minute later, Evan's number appeared on the screen. I answered this time, not because I owed him anything, but because clarity works best when delivered early. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" "Humiliation is being ordered out of your own living room," I said evenly. "What you are feeling now is inconvenience." He laughed sharply, the sound brittle. "You are trying to control us with money." "No," I replied. "I stopped confusing help with obligation." He began to talk fast then, words tumbling over each other, explaining how things were temporary, how the market had shifted, how his investments were about to turn around. He said the same phrases he had used for years whenever I asked gentle questions. "Just a little longer. Almost there. Trust me." This time, I did not interrupt. When he finished, breathing hard, I asked one question. Where is the money, Evan? There was a pause, a real one. You would not understand. Try me. Rachel's voice slipped into the call, thin and shaken. He said it was tied up. He said we were saving. Saving what? I asked her softly. Another silence. Then Evan snapped back in, anger covering something else now. Fear. You are overreacting. You cannot just pull the rug out from under us. I looked at the bank notification still glowing on my screen. Transaction declined $87. Meat department. You pulled the rug out from under yourselves, I said. I simply stopped holding it up. I ended the call. At the hotel, I walked to the window and stood there, phone in hand. More messages came in. Evan accusing, Rachel pleading. I did not answer. Silence was no longer absence. It was a boundary. A little later, another notification arrived. This one was quieter, but heavier. Account update. Supplementary card closed. Alerts active on primary holder only. I sat down on the edge of the bed and let the weight of it settle. The money had been my voice for years, speaking when I would not. Now that voice was gone, and what remained was truth. Across town, Evan was discovering what happens when confidence meets arithmetic. When promises are asked to show receipts. When the noise stops and only numbers remain. I did not feel victorious. I felt steady. By late afternoon, Daniel texted me. Expect escalation. When money stops, masks fall. Be ready for tomorrow. I typed back one word. Ready. As the sun lowered over the city, I realized something else had stopped along with the money, the fear. It had nowhere to live anymore. And without it, everything Evan had built his authority on began to collapse, quietly, publicly, and all at once. The conference room was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that sharpens your thoughts whether you want it to or not. I arrived early and chose the chair at the end of the table, not out of strategy but out of habit. From there I could see everything clearly, the door, the windows, the faces when they came in. Daniel Price sat to my right, his folders stacked neatly, pen aligned with the edge of the table. He nodded once, a small gesture of readiness. In front of me lay three things only: my identification, the deed, the notice. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened. Evan entered first, moving too fast, shoulders tight, jaw set like he was bracing for impact. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose. Eyes rimmed red from a night that had not gone his way. Rachel followed a step behind, clutching her purse with both hands as if it were the only solid thing left in her world. She did not look at me at first. Please be seated, Daniel said calmly. We are not here to play games, Evan snapped, dropping into a chair. We have lived in that house for years. You cannot just throw us out. I waited. Let him speak. People always reveal themselves if you give them enough rope. We have rights, Evan continued, his voice rising. There is such a thing as adverse possession. We lived there openly. Everyone knows it is our home. I looked at him over my glasses. That is not what adverse possession means. He scoffed. Of course you would say that. I spent 3 decades recording property claims, I replied. Adverse possession requires the owner to be absent, unaware, and unpaid. I lived there. I paid everything, and I am very aware. Daniel slid the deed forward slightly, not as a threat, but as a fact. The ownership is clear. There is no lease. Consent has been withdrawn. The notice is valid. Evan turned to Rachel then, panic flashing through his anger. Tell them this is unfair. Rachel finally looked at me. Her eyes searched my face for the softness she remembered, the mother who fixed things quietly. She did not find it. "Mom," she whispered, "he said we were saving. He said everything was under control. That was my opening." "Saving requires numbers," I said. I reached into my folder and placed several documents on the table. Bank statements, loan notices, a brokerage summary printed in black and white. "What is this?" Evan barked, reaching for them. Daniel's hand stopped his. "Let her read it." Rachel picked up the pages. Her eyes moved quickly at first, then slower, then froze. Her breath caught. I watched the exact moment understanding replaced hope. "It is negative," she said softly. "There is nothing here." "Worse than nothing," I corrected. "Debt. Margin calls, losses rolled over again and again." Evan leaned back, color draining from his face. "It was temporary," he said weakly. "The market would have turned." "So you needed my house to buy time," I said, "and my silence to keep your story alive." He slammed his hand on the table. "I am your son-in-law. Family helps family. Family does not silence its elders," I replied. "Family does not fund lies." I stood then, slowly, deliberately. The room followed me into stillness. "Here are the terms. 30 days. No extensions. Utilities and accounts in my name remain closed. Any attempt to intimidate or harass me will be documented and addressed legally. When I collect my belongings, I expect no confrontation." Rachel's shoulders shook. Evan said nothing. "And one more thing," I added, turning to my daughter. "What you do next is your choice. You can stay tied to a man who spent 4 years spending your future, or you can step away and build your own. I will not finance either decision." Daniel closed his folder. "This meeting is concluded." As I walked past Evan, I paused just long enough to say quietly, "You confused my patience with permission. That mistake will cost you." The door closed behind me with a soft, final click. For the first time, the law had spoken louder than his voice. The fallout did not take long. By the time I reached the hotel, my phone was already vibrating again, not with anger this time, but with something thinner and more fragile. Fear travels faster when there is nowhere left to hide it. Daniel called first. His voice was measured, professional. Evan contacted his employer during the meeting. He was emotional, accusatory. He copied people he should not have. There will be consequences. I closed my eyes briefly. Evan had always believed volume could substitute for leverage. In the wrong room, it had cost him more than he realized. That evening, as the light outside softened and the city cooled, my phone rang with Rachel's name. I answered. "I did not get in the car," she said immediately. Her voice was flat, exhausted. "He was shouting in the parking lot, telling me I owed him loyalty. I just walked away." "Good," I said quietly. "Where are you now?" "I am sitting on a bench. I do not know where to go." "You know how to work," I said. "You know how to breathe. Start there." She was silent for a moment, then asked the question I had been waiting for. "If I leave him, will you still be my mother?" I felt the weight of it in my chest, not as pain, but as gravity. "I will always be your mother," I said, "but I will never again be your shelter from consequences that are not mine." She exhaled, a long, shaky breath. "He says you destroyed our family." "No, Rachel. I stopped paying for the lie. That is not destruction. That is truth." That night, she slept on a friend's couch. The next morning, she signed a short-term lease on a small studio apartment near her job. It had thin walls and a window that faced a brick alley, but it was hers. She opened her own bank account. She canceled the shared credit line. She did not tell Evan where she lived. A week later, she called me again. Her voice sounded different, clearer. I met with a lawyer, she said. I am filing for divorce. I said nothing for a moment, letting the words settle between us. Then I said, I am proud of you. She laughed softly, a sound edged with disbelief. I keep thinking if you had turned the internet back on, if you had fixed the card, I would have gone back. I would have apologized. I would still be there. I know, I said. That is why I did not. We talked for a long time that night. Not about Evan, but about her work, her fears, the strange relief of paying her own rent, about learning the cost of groceries when no one is rescuing you. When we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed and understood something with absolute certainty. My daughter had not needed saving. She had needed a door. And by closing one, I had finally shown her how to open another. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere, Evan was still shouting into empty rooms. Somewhere else, Rachel was learning how quiet freedom could be. And for the first time since he told me to get out, the house no longer felt like the center of the story. The people were. Day 30 arrived without ceremony. I did not wake up with dread or anticipation. I woke the way I used to before Evan moved in, calm, clear-headed, unhurried. I made coffee in the hotel room, stood by the window, and watched the city stretch itself awake. Today was not about confrontation. It was about completion. Daniel had insisted I not be present. Let the paper finish the work, he had said. Let the house breathe before you walk back in. So I left town for the morning. I drove west until the buildings thinned and the road opened into pale desert light. I sat in a quiet cafe, ordered toast and eggs, and read a book without turning the page too quickly. Every so often, my phone buzzed, but I did not rush to it. At 9:47, a single message appeared. They are loading the truck. At 10:12, keys will be handed over shortly. At 11, inventory completed. Minor damage noted. Locks intact. At 11:30, they are gone. That was all. No shouting, no dramatic calls, no final accusations. Just a truck pulling away from a house that had carried weight it was never meant to bear. I returned in the afternoon. The gate opened easily. The key turned without resistance, as if the house recognized my hand. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the residue of voices that had filled it too loudly for too long. The living room looked larger without the couch Evan had claimed like a throne. Pale rectangles marked where pictures had hung. Small holes scarred the wall where screens and brackets had been mounted. I opened every window. The breeze moved through the rooms like a cleansing breath, lifting the curtains, stirring dust that had settled into corners unnoticed. I rolled up my sleeves, filled a bucket with warm water and cleaner, and began at the floor. There is something deeply honest about scrubbing a space back to yourself. No speeches, no witnesses, just steady work. I washed the baseboards. I wiped the shelves. I carried out bags of things no one would miss. Old magazines, broken cords, half-empty bottles of whatever Evan had decided he needed. When the painter arrived the next morning, I chose the color without hesitation. Peach, I said. Warm. Quiet. By evening, the family room glowed softly, no longer a battleground, but a place meant to be lived in. I set my chair back by the window. I placed the small table beside it. I made tea and let the kettle sing without fear of complaint. The house did not feel victorious. It felt returned. Later that night, a knock came at the door. Polite, measured. I knew who it was. Rachel stood on the porch, hands folded, eyes cautious, but steady. She did not step forward until I nodded. "May I come in?" she asked. "As a guest?" "Yes," I said. "Come in." She looked around slowly, taking in the peach walls, the quiet, the absence of tension she had mistaken for normal. She exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for years. "It feels different," she said. "It is different," I replied. We sat at the table with 2 mugs between us. No accusations, no apologies, just presence. The house was no longer something to be fought over. It was finally home again. The quiet that followed surprised me, not the empty kind, not the aching kind, but the steady quiet of a place that no longer had to brace itself. In the mornings, light moved across the peach walls, slowly, unchallenged. I brewed coffee without checking my phone. I watched the news with the volume exactly where I liked it. No footsteps hurried down the hall. No one reached for a remote that was not theirs. A week later, I hosted my first Wednesday afternoon tea. It was not planned as anything important, just an open invitation to a few women from the neighborhood, friends of friends, mostly widows or retirees who had lived long enough to know something felt wrong, but not always why. They arrived with folded worries and cautious smiles. We sat at the dining table with cups of tea and plates of pie cooling between us. The questions came softly at first. "My son wants me to add his name to the deed. My daughter says it is easier if she manages my accounts. They say it is temporary." I listened more than I spoke. Then I took out a folder and laid it on the table. "Ownership is not love," I said. "Love does not require signatures. If you want to leave something behind, you write a will. While you are alive, the house stays yours. Your money stays yours. Your voice stays yours." They leaned in. Pens came out. Shoulders straightened. Rachel came later that evening, knocking lightly, waiting to be invited. She no longer had keys. She no longer needed them. She told me about her apartment, small and imperfect, but paid for with her own hands. About learning to budget. About how strange it felt not to be rescued and how strong it made her feel. She did not ask to stay. She did not ask for help. She asked for tea. That was how I knew she would be all right. When she left, I stood in the family room alone and picked up the remote. It was just plastic and buttons. Nothing powerful about it at all. I turned the volume up one small click, then stopped. Enough. That word had changed for me. It no longer meant endurance. It meant clarity. Here is what I learned, and what I want anyone listening to understand. Love without boundaries becomes exploitation. Silence in the face of disrespect is not peace. It is permission. And saying no at the right moment does not destroy families. It reveals them. Ownership is not just about deeds and keys. It is about the right to choose who sits at your table, how loud the room is, and whether you are seen in your own home. That night, I turned off the television, not because someone told me to, but because I was ready. The house breathed quietly around me. For the first time in years, I was not staying somewhere. I was home. I want to end this story with the lesson I learned the hard way. Love does not mean disappearing inside your own life. Family does not mean enduring disrespect in silence. And helping someone should never cost you your dignity, your safety, or your voice. For years, I thought being patient made me kind. I thought staying quiet kept the peace. But silence did not protect me. It trained others to treat me as invisible. The moment I said no, everything became clear. Who respected me, who used me, and who only stayed as long as I paid the price. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. Saying no does not break families. It exposes the truth and gives everyone a chance to grow up. If you are listening to this and feel small in your own home, please hear me. You are allowed to take your space back. You are allowed to choose peace. Now I want to hear from you. What lesson did you take from my story? And which city are you watching from right now?